12. Discovering the non-athletic you. I had just picked up Michael Coghill from the bus station in downtown Oxford. He was a beautiful specimen of a black student athlete. You see, track and field is an endurance sport that shapes your entire body, and I just felt if I had stayed with it, I would be looking as attractive as did Michael. This sport combined the various skills of running, jumping, accelerating, keeping balance, building strength, and flexibility. You can see all of this endurance work being crafted into splendid physical expression in this athlete. But what was most pleasing was how pleasant and accommodating this young man had become. You could imagine how anxious I was to find out who he was and why he thought that I, of all persons, could help him in his trouble. He started to tell his story, not in a mournful or complaining manner, but in a way that exhibited some pride and confidence. So, what exactly was the problem? And why was he coming all the way south to Oxford to consult with me? Well, let me start by saying that Michael Coghill is a freshman at Oberlin College on the track and field team. I am from Dayton. You know Deacon Pindlin at Trinity Congregational? Yes, I know who he is. Well, he is my stepfather. He's married to my mother. Michael's story, like that of most black youth, was a mixture of good fortunes punctuated with disastrous events. He had won an athletic scholarship to Oberlin and was happy to leave Dayton, and the tension that was rising between himself and his stepfather about attending church. At Oberlin, he soon became a star on the team. Oberlin College had a pioneering history when it comes to both academics and sports. It is an NCAA Division III school. Just for comparison, Miami University is a Division I, and both schools are part of the National Collegiate Athletic Association, NCAA. But Oberlin College is one of the founding members of the North Coast Athletic Conference, NCAC. The NCAC was a new playing conference in the NCAA Division III, created in 1984. It comprised mostly of colleges and universities in Indiana and Ohio. Its most prominent characteristic was that the NCAC's stance, written into the preamble of its constitution, that women's sports should have equity with men's sports. NCAC's response to the gender equality was totally in line with emerging norms of the 1980s. But Oberlin's participation in the NCAC would come as no surprise to anyone who knew the academic history of this college. Oberlin College was the first college in the world, yes, you are hearing me right, in the world, to admit women as well as men. It was also the first college that promised to educate African American men and women. Today, nearly all colleges and universities teach black and white men and women, but back in the 1830s, this was unheard of. In a peculiar way, slave settler society was oppressive to Africans, but also repressive to white women. Over the years, Oberlin College had done very well academically. The Wall Street Journal ranked the college at number 63 overall, and number 2 for small colleges in the Midwest. For the top liberal arts colleges and universities in 2022, Forbes magazine ranked Oberlin as number 51. The Princeton Review included the school in its list of the best 388 colleges in the USA. I could already see the advice coalescing in my mind. Keep on running for the school, but prioritize your academics. So what happened with you and the team? Well, I was winning in most of my competitive meets. Then we had a major meeting coming up. It was the Division III All-Ohio Track and Field Championship. It was going to be held at the sports complex of Spire Institute in Geneva, Ohio, and I was expected to medal again. But the coach dropped me from the side that would travel to the games. At our final pre-game exercise, he called out the names of the traveling team. Having not heard my name, I said, "Coach, you forgot to call my name." "I called the names of those who are going. If you did not hear your name, you are not included." That response hit me hard and cold. And then, like an afterthought, he said something to the effect, "Coghill, I will see you in my office." And turning to the assistant coach, he said, "And you can come along also." Michael recounted how he had first viewed this scenario as the assistant coach getting back at him, but soon realized that it was not that at all. Later that afternoon, in the coach's office, he was faced with a new reality. We needed to look at this scenario in even more detail, because it was not about deception or misinformation. It was more on how our imagination tends to fill in the gaps in the knowledge of what is going on, and in a way that most probably reinforces our worst fears. It reminded me of the themes in that Oedipus Rex play that brought Gwen and myself together. The coach started by asking Michael whether he had had any trouble with the law. Michael was a little alarmed by this line of inquiry. You see, it may be easy for a white coach to assume that somewhere in the past his black athlete had a run-in with the law. However, to an innocent black youth, that was the worst categorization one could thrust on his youthfulness. The coach continued to explain that he had been called to the dean's office the afternoon before to be informed that the president of the college had given permission for the FBI to come onto the campus on Friday to interview a student by the name of Michael Coghill. Coach started to tell the dean that Mr. Coghill would not be available because the team was traveling on that Friday for a division meet in northern Ohio. To which remark, the dean immediately responded that he, the coach, could be charged with obstructing justice if he failed to make sure that Mr. Coghill attended that interview with the FBI. Coach summed up the situation as follows: "The assistant coach will stay back and accompany you to that interview." "Okay, yes sir," was Michael's response. By this time, I was totally lost on two accounts. First, what is this about the FBI wanting to interview Michael? And secondly, why is Michael seeking my advice in a matter that I have no expertise, far less experience? Michael then proceeded to drop the real bombshell. At the morning of the interview, the assistant coach started to ask him if he had thought through what he was going to say to the FBI. "What do you mean by what I am going to say?" Michael responded, somewhat in annoyance. "I don't even know why they're here questioning me." "I mean, what if they ask you about us?" "About us? Where does the team come into this?" "I don't mean the team, I mean us, like you and I." "What about you and I?" "Remember that kiss?" At junction, Michael got very silent in his storytelling. He sort of froze up, as if he was pondering whether to continue to explain what this kiss was about. "You see, bro, there is a darker side to my story, and I hope you will not be offended with me, because you are the first person and the only person that I've had the courage to tell this to." Michael started by explaining that this assistant coach was a young graduate who was very skilled in coaching track and field athletes. He was responsible for changing Michael's whole posture in every part of the middle distance sprint. But he seemed to have developed a crush on Michael. Once, when this coach was closing up the gym, Michael was the only person there, and somehow he held Michael back and planted a kiss on his lips before letting him go. Michael started to get confused by his advances. Then everything really came to a head when the team was trying to return from a meeting in Michigan. There was an early, heavy snowfall in northern Ohio, the usual Lake Erie effect, and the roads had become impassable. The head coach had decided that they would stay overnight in a Holiday Inn and wait for the roads to clear. Coach had assigned 2 members to a room, but being sensitive about where to put the only black team member, he had asked the young assistant coach to share his room with him. As Michael would tell it, he went up to the room not knowing who was assigned to share his room. He immediately took a shower, washed his underwear in the shower, and put it on the heat vent to dry so that he would have a fresh pair of underwear in the morning. The assistant coach entered the room while he was already under his covers. Preparing for bed, he said something to the effect if Michael wanted to give him a goodnight kiss. Soon Michael and the assistant coach were kissing, while the latter had his hands roaming under the sheet, discovering that Michael was naked. Within a minute, he was down on Michael, performing oral sex on the lad. Confused and in shock, Michael just lay there until he was finished. Things changed from then. Michael started to realize that this affair was not going to end well, and from then on, he started to rebuff any and all approaches from the assistant coach. That is why he initially thought his exclusion from the team was an act of revenge from the coach. You know, I am off the team for medical reasons. I knew nothing about that either. No, I didn't. Why? Well, I have been under supervision by the university psychiatrist as part of a treatment for mental illness. Let me explain, bro, what caused that. On our way to the FBI interview, I told you that the assistant coach wanted to know what I was going to tell them if they asked about our kiss. I told him he didn't have cause to be worried because he could deny it. And if it comes to my word against my white coach, who do you think they would believe? The white coach, of course. Then he said, well, I have good cause to be concerned because I have a family to protect. Michael then replied, what family? I have a wife, you know. You have a what? Man, Eric, that hit me like a ton of bricks. This son of a bitch had been trying to get sexual with me on the down low, while all the time he had a wife at home. For a week I could not get that out of my head, that he must have seen me like some male whore for his pleasure. That sent me into a depression and I started skipping classes. The head coach was looking out for me though. He thought that my depression was coming from the FBI interview. So he immediately got me to the local doctor and started me on these psychiatric sessions. So what did the psychiatrist say? Did you tell her about the affair with the assistant coach? Are you crazy, man? I couldn't tell her that. My coach would immediately lose his job. And deep down, I guess I really liked the guy. You see, if a young lady goes to the university clinic with bruises and refuses to divulge where she got those bruises, they would immediately call in the campus police. If I were to say that I was being sexually harassed by the coach, all that stuff about doctor-client privileges would go out of the window. She would be compelled to relay that information to the campus police. I know my psychiatrist knew that I was hiding something. So she said I should find someone that I could trust and tell that person all the things that were bothering me. I tried telling it to Robbie, but then he stopped me and said, I think you should talk with my cousin Eric in Miami. And what was the FBI interview all about? Oh, that was the least of my trouble. When I got to the interview, the assistant coach wanted to be present, and they immediately dismissed him. Then the lead detective, there were two of them, said, Eric, don't be afraid. This has nothing to do with you. We just want to ask you a few questions. Do you know Jared Champagne? At first I said no, because the entire name did not sound familiar to me. Then he said, he is the pastor at Trinity Congregational Church. That is when it finally registered. They were investigating that criminal Pastor Champagne. He was the reason why I stopped going to that church, and my stepfather could not understand that. Of course, I never told my stepfather. I told the investigators how he had held me down and tried to rape me with all his genitals hanging out, but I escaped. I thought he must have tried that with you also, Eric. With me? Why do you say that? Because of some of the words he used when he was trying to lure you to the podium with him that Sunday. When I saw how you refused, I just knew something from your past must have been stopping you. That is when I was sure you were the one I needed to talk to. By this time, I was having difficulty processing all of this information. Michael continued, Don't worry, they're going to lock his ass up very soon. You raped a little boy sometime last year, and the child had to be hospitalized for 5 weeks. The child finally fingered him, and they, the FBI, were just trying to collect any evidence to show that this is a habit of the pastor. It was past 2 o'clock, and I knew that Michael was exhausted. He had even started to tear up during the last bit of confession. Hugging him as tight as I could, I said, Michael, you don't know how grateful I am that you have chosen to share this type of information with me. You are my little brother, and I'm going to protect you and try to help you see a better future. But it's time now for both of us to get some sleep. How are you doing academically? Oh, I'm doing pretty good. All A's except in a course in biology. I'm having some difficulty with that. Anyway, I walked with my textbook to study while I'm here. You know what? Gwen is a graduate student in biological sciences. Maybe she can help you with some of it tomorrow. I will talk to her. But in the meantime, get yourself a good night's sleep. You came home to the right, big brother. I was confident that Gwen would do this. After all, did she not think that he was hot to start with? The new Michael connection was not that much an eye-opener for me. I had already resolved my priority between sports and the academics. You see, I still ran a couple of miles every day, and even more so as I was forced to keep a schedule because of my friendship with Father Chuck, the young Episcopal vicar. Running continued to be part of my makeup. Not only did it keep me fit, but more importantly, it had become the main instrument for me to deal with the various stresses in my life. I desperately wanted to take a run with Michael and see if that would help to detox him from all the baggage that he had just acquired. This was no way for him to start his young college life. I woke him up at 6 a.m. Poor guy. I didn't think he was ready for this, but in a manner that showed his fidelity for me, he happily consented. He had very good stamina. We ran about 1.5 miles around Miami's track field, with the vicar joining in the last lap and a half. Then, while sitting on the grass at the side, as we cooled off, I started to explain to him how I used running to reduce stress. I had been reading Professor Gerald Horne's masterpiece about slave resistance and the origins of the United States of America. In that book, I started to understand that I really came out of 4 centuries of physical, mental, and survival challenges deliberately wrought upon people of black skin, but we fought on and kept on overcoming each new hurdle. It is like being on the track. You just have to keep on running. Little Michael and I started reflecting together. Our births were not just events of destiny and human nature. We were the evidence of the success of previous generations, overcoming their fears and doubts, and making something that is both good and lasting come out of their physical existence. Just think about this, Michael. If you were born in a white skin, you would not be having these challenges. But you were born in a black skin, which has a long, very long history of successes. Yes, bro, I understand. Our history is not only about slavery and dehumanization. It is also about success over some of the most horrendous crimes against humans, unprecedented in the history of mankind. That was one of my first pep talks, and his last statement showed that despite his casual demeanor, he obviously had internalized a lot of thinking that explained his predicaments. He seemed to have enjoyed the short exchange. My advice to him was to keep the academics strong because your future was not going to be in track and field. Our brothers who are on the football team sometimes fail to realize that statistically, only 1.6% of the college athletes ever become professionals. The blacks who make it in the sport make it in because of their strong legs, but they also make it out successfully because of their smarts. Eric, I love you, guy. His sincerity expressed everything about him in that moment. I suggested that he check in with Gwen later that afternoon to get some help in the biology lessons. Since he had his textbook with him, she could spotlight the exact contents and subjects that may be giving him trouble. Michael, do not carry the baggage of the assistant coach nor the team. That guy does not mean to hurt you. He just got lost in his admiration for you. Give it appropriate distance, and the next time he comes on to you, just suggest to him that he should do the same. We got back, changed, and went onto the campus with Dad. Dad was coming to the end of his stay here at Miami and was conducting the final seminars with his special graduate class. I had 2 papers to turn in before the beginning of the next week, which was heralding the period for final exams. Michael spent that afternoon with Gwen going over most of the chapters in his biology text. It was interesting because she thought he appeared to understand all of the concepts and the configurations of the anatomy of species. That she thought he was very smart was not surprising. She had also thought that he was hot. So I just didn't know how to evaluate her assessment. Michael stayed the whole of Friday and did not leave until the afternoon of Saturday. He had a layover in Cincinnati before getting a bus towards West Virginia, which would pass through Oberlin, Ohio. What was most exciting about his visit was when he called to say that he believed that because of his performance in the biology final, he would likely get an A. That was good because most of his other subjects were A's and A pluses. In his excitement, he wanted Gwen to know that 4 of the 6 questions on the final were the ones she had explained to him. One of these was a question to frame a research project based on what he had learned so far in biology. This seemed to carry a lot of weight with the instructor because he wanted to see which one of his students may have already been anticipating doing advanced studies in the biological sciences. Gwen had asked him this very question and had picked apart his preliminary answer so as to come up with a more coherent response. He was sure that was the clincher in the final exam. I also learned a few lessons from that Thanksgiving episode. You know how they say men are from Jupiter, but women are from Mars? Well, we are different, but deep down, we both want the same thing: love and intimacy, or in more casual terms, attention and appreciation. This is how I figured it out. I did not get too much of either of these gifts when I was growing up in Dayton, but I got a huge lot of it from my new dad in Miami University and from my best friend Michael, that is the senior Michael. It struck me that most young black men like myself truly wanted to shower these human gifts of attention and affection to the other sex, to the extent that we ourselves had been recipient of the same. But there is where the problems began. Most black men were not accustomed to much love and affection in their lives, and so they struggled to give the same in their relationships. I am so tired of hearing Michael and my peers saying, "She loves me more than I love her," and they view this as an insurance against losing the girl. When I came back from Dayton, I decided that I would give Gwen as much love as I had experienced in my latter life. Although the love I received was more paternal, it had some good guidelines inside of it. Always do more than show concern for the challenges of your charge. Act in a manner to resolve it ASAP. When Gwen faced problems in her lab, I would seek to allow her more time by removing some of the things she was planning to do. My intention was to remove the pressure for more time, and so doing, refresh her entire temperament to start over again. I viewed this as an opportunity to express my love and affection. During the Christmas season, Gwen sought to fill out our days with activities in which I was expected to be in attendance. She had a voracious appetite for movies, which I didn't. In her growing up, this was the main reward that her dad had extended to her and her brother Adrian. It was interesting how movie-going by the townspeople became a hot item during their seasons when the university was closed. The cinemas did their best to lure them in. The university closed in the second week of December, and immediately that weekend, Gwen wanted to go to the movies. If it wasn't Black Demon, then Birdwatch Barcelona, and then Babylon and the Road Home. How did I get through this? By reordering my priorities and giving love and attention, just like my father had done.